When I was a kid, I could spend 3 hours playing with a cardboard box and a handful of action figures. But last month, I couldn't stand in a grocery store line for 30 seconds without checking my phone. And I think that change is doing something to our brains that most of us haven't noticed. We solve boredom so completely that I don't think we've stopped to ask what it was doing for us in the first place. There was a time where being bored was just a normal part of life. You didn't have a phone to check when you were waiting in line at the grocery store or sitting in the back seat during a long car ride. There wasn't something always competing for your attention. Sometimes there was nothing to do except sit with your thoughts. And I feel like today, those moments barely exist for most people. And on first thought, this sounds like a good thing. Boring isn't typically a term we use to describe things we like, but I've noticed something. We've never had more ways to entertain ourselves, yet a lot of people seem mentally exhausted all the time. We have unlimited content, unlimited music, unlimited videos, and somehow it still feels like something is missing. We've gotten so good at filling every empty moment that boredom has started to feel like a problem that needs to be solved, rather than just a factor of life. Every app, every notification, every recommendation gives us something to do the second we have a free moment. And eventually, we've just stopped having free moments. What used to be small pockets of boredom throughout the day have now been replaced with a constant stream of stimulation. We're entertained while we wait, distracted while we walk, and occupied from the moment we wake up to the moment we fall asleep. Have you ever noticed that your best ideas seem to arrive when you're not trying to force them? Think about it. When was the last time you had a genuinely good idea? Chances are it didn't happen while you were scrolling on TikTok or sitting at a desk trying to be productive. They show up in places like the shower or on a walk or while you're driving or right before you fall asleep. And that's because when your mind isn't focused on a specific task, it enters something called the default mode network. This is basically your brain's background processing system. It becomes active when you're awake but not focused on a specific task. So, when you're daydreaming, reflecting, imagining the future, or simply letting your mind wander. So, the point is, if you're filling every quiet moment with more content, your brain never really gets the chance to sort through what it's experiencing. The problem isn't necessarily that we're consuming too much information. The problem is we've stopped giving ourselves time to process it. That's probably why you feel like nothing sticks, and that's also why I feel like a lot of people are mentally scattered and struggling to figure out what they want from life. We spend so much time consuming that we rarely stop to reflect, and myself included. For a long time, I thought I was just unmotivated, but looking back, I think it was because I wasn't giving myself any time to think. Every quiet moment got replaced with YouTube, music, podcast, or scrolling. And the weird thing is, it felt productive. I was always learning something, always entertained, always occupied, but I wasn't giving myself any space to actually think. I've learned that you need to make time for self reflection. It's how you learn from your mistakes and process your experiences in life. If you're wondering why you can't think of an original idea or you're struggling to be creative, I'm telling you, this is one of the reasons why. Your brain's default mode network is one of the main systems that helps generate creative ideas and make connections between them. And what's interesting is this isn't just something that happens in your brain, it's something that actually shows up across all of human history. Think about it for a second. Humans have spent over 300,000 years trying to fill the silence of boredom with something meaningful. Over the years, it was art, storytelling, inventions. All these are products of being bored. And the interesting thing is, boredom isn't just doing nothing. Something is actually happening in the background. When you're bored, your mind starts to wander. And when your mind starts to wander, you start connecting things that don't normally connect. That's where ideas come from. Not when you're actively trying to force them, but when your brain finally has space to drift. That's why a lot of your best ideas don't happen when you're sitting at a desk trying to be productive. They happen when you're doing something simple and mindless. Because your brain is finally allowed to step back and think instead of just reacting to everything. And this doesn't just apply to generating ideas. A lot of the time, boredom is also where you start solving problems in your life without even realizing it. You stop overthinking about what's in front of you for a second, and your mind starts processing things you've been avoiding, things you've been pushing away because you've been too distracted to sit with them. And that's kind of the irony. The thing we've been trying to escape from the most for our entire lives might actually be the thing that helps us understand our lives better. If you look at human history, boredom has never really been the enemy. It's been the starting point. Something I was actually thinking of the other day was, imagine if Isaac Newton had TikTok, right? He's sitting under the tree and the apple falls. And instead of wondering why objects fall towards Earth, he's too busy checking his notifications to make an observation. Obviously, that's ridiculous, but that's kind of the point. Some of humanity's biggest breakthroughs happened during moments that looked unproductive from the outside, like sitting under a tree. So, moments where people had nothing to do except think. The cure for boredom used to be creation, and now it's consumption, and I think that's changing us in ways we don't fully understand yet. And I think the part we actually feel the most isn't the history of it, it's what it's turned into in our everyday lives. And I think that shows up in a way that most people don't really notice, and that's the cost of constant stimulation. You don't have time to observe and think about what's happening around you, what's happening within you. If every uncomfortable thought gets covered up by a podcast, a video, or a scroll through social media, eventually you stop listening to yourself altogether. And when you stop listening to yourself, it's pretty hard to know what you actually want in life. For a long time, I feel like I myself lost that inner voice. It felt like I was just consuming everyone else's opinions, everyone else's content and ideas, and I wasn't spending much time figuring out what I actually thought. The more disconnected I felt, the more uncertain I became, and the more uncertain I became, the more uncomfortable my thoughts felt, which only made me want to drown them out even more. It's a cycle, but the good news is, I don't think the solution is complicated. You don't need to throw your phone in a lake, you don't need to move into the woods, you just need to start giving your brain some space again. And that's why I myself intentionally get bored. And before I tell you guys about this, I almost want to stop using the word bored because most of this stuff doesn't even feel boring for me anymore. So we're going to start calling it relaxing your brain because, to be honest, that's what it is for me now. Anytime I feel overwhelmed or I feel like I can't focus, I take some time to be in silence. There's a lot of ways you can go about this, but one thing I'd strongly recommend is leaving your phone somewhere else. Go put it on a charger in another room. Out of sight, out of mind. In fact, I try to start my day without my phone for at least the first 45 minutes after I wake up. I like to try and let my brain wake up without immediately overstimulating it. Then, throughout the day, I take time for silence whenever I need it. One of my personal favorite things to do, especially later in the day when it's less busy, is go for a walk. It's a great way to calm your mind and reflect on things. But if you don't want to do that, even doing some mundane chores around the house without listening to a podcast or music will do just fine. Or you can simply lay or sit down in silence for 10 minutes. The more you do this, the easier it's going to get. I actually look forward to silence now. Not that I don't listen to YouTube or Spotify while I'm doing stuff ever. I don't think it's inherently bad to do that. It's just about finding balance. I still love listening to music and I still watch YouTube. But I just try to make sure I'm giving my brain some space to think every once in a while. And when I think about it, actually, I think I used to live like that naturally when I was younger. Maybe that's why a cardboard box kept me entertained for 3 hours when I was a kid. It wasn't because the box was interesting. It was because my mind had room to be interesting. I had room to imagine, room to wander, to think. And It's got me thinking. Maybe boredom was never the enemy. Maybe it was a space where the best parts of us were waiting to show up.